What do you do every time that there is a small gap in your day? Let's say you're waiting in line for 5 minutes, you look at your phone. You're waiting on your friend who's a little late, you look at your phone. You're stopped at a red light, stuck in an elevator, whatever it may be, your natural response to these moments is that you pull out your phone. That is what you do with every single pocket of empty time that you have throughout the day before you have even decided anything or made a conscious choice to do that. I want you to notice that you didn't actually choose to look at it in those moments. There was no conscious thought there. This was more of a reflex. The automatically reaching for your phone during every single gap in your day is the entire subject of this video, because I think it's a sign of something that not a lot of people are willing to address, which is that you may very well be bad at being alone. And I don't mean alone in the sense that nobody else is around. I mean alone with your own thoughts, with no feed, no input, no external factors coming in, just you alone with your own brain. That state of being alone completely by yourself with just your own thoughts to keep you company used to be a very normal part of being a human. Now for a lot of people, it's become very unpleasant, maybe even unbearable, something that they always strive to escape from within a few seconds of it popping up. And I think if that's you, that's actually costing you more than you realize. And I think that that has significant mental and psychological tolls that it takes when added up over the years and years that you've built this habit. If you haven't watched me before, my name is Charlie. There was a time in my life a few years ago when I could not sit still with my own head, even for 2 minutes, without getting bored and reaching for my phone. Now though, a couple years later, I have managed to fix this, and I want to explain to you the benefits of me doing so. And I think that this goes a lot deeper than just you being bored. Most people frame picking up the phone as just the natural thing to do when you're bored. That happens, and you solve this problem by scrolling. And that is part of it, but I would say that's a very shallow problem. And if we only focus on that, we're gonna miss the deeper root of the issue. Being bad at boredom and being bad at being alone with yourself are two very different things. Boredom is just an understimulated or unstimulated moment, but being with yourself is something different. Like I said, it's a matter of you just being alone with you for company, with no external input. The only thing left to occupy you when you put yourself in these situations is to think about whatever's going on underneath the surface of your life. And I think that's something that a lot of people are really running from. Not the boredom or the silence necessarily, that is just a symptom of the larger issue, which is running from being alone with themselves. Because what happens when you do actually allow yourself to have one of these quiet moments with no external stimulation is that you do start to think about your own life. Your mind, with nothing else to do, will turn to, for example, that conversation that you keep on thinking about, or whatever keeps bugging you, or even the state of your life right now, and perhaps you're not as far along as you want it to be by this time. None of that stuff is very comfortable to think about. So the second that those thoughts start to emerge, you can pick up your phone and start scrolling and sweep them all back under the rug. Let me put this in a way that I think is going to resonate with you, because I suspect that you have likely seen this in somebody you know in your life. Do you know a person who physically cannot seem to put their phone down, even if it's just something as simple as eating a meal? Their phone fills every little gap. They're always checking something. They seem incapable of just sitting across from you and having a normal person-to-person conversation. We all notice that when it happens. Maybe we even get a little bit annoyed by it, and maybe we think it's a little sad, and what we certainly think is that, wow, this person seems unwilling or physically cannot be present with whomever they're sitting across from. But the part that you now have to acknowledge is that when you pull out your phone every time you're sitting alone with yourself, you're actually doing exactly that. Whenever you do this, you're signaling that you would rather not be present with the person you're with, except this time the person that you are with is yourself. You've been treating yourself like that boring or insufferable guest at the dinner table that you can't even stand to have a conversation with. You've been avoiding this through this phone habit that you built up over months and over years. And what do you think that that does to any relationship? If you ghosted your friend every time that they said they wanted to hang out, or if you pulled out your phone every time they tried to talk to you, what do you think would happen? Obviously that would fizzle out. They wouldn't want to be your friend anymore. You guys would end up strangers. And that's what happened with you and your own mind. You've been unavailable to yourself for so long that you've basically become strangers, but with the one person you can never actually leave the presence of, which is yourself. But so what, Charlie? What does it matter if you're not on great terms with yourself? Well, here's the cost of that. Well, first of all, you stop processing your life. Your mind uses that quiet, undirected time to sort through all the experiences in your life, to process what's been bugging you or what's been ruminating under the surface of your mind that you've been too busy to think about lately. It processes all those experiences instead of just letting you accumulate them. If you cut off all moments of quiet time in your brain, your brain's no longer able to do that. Which is why all this stuff seems to stack up, which is a big part of why you perhaps have a feeling of being vaguely restless or feeling somewhat behind in life, but you can't really articulate why you have that feeling. You've got a bunch of unprocessed experiences up there sitting in your brain, and instead of giving it the time to process them and sort through everything that's been happening to you, you just fill it with more and more and more input. Second thing, you stop actually getting to know yourself. That self-knowledge, knowing what you want, what you believe, what you want to do, what you actually think about something, that all comes from spending time in your own head. All the free time that you spend is filled with consuming other people's content, other people's feeds. You're never going to get the chance to form your opinions. Your brain is going to become the average of the content feed that you consume. You can end up in your 20s or even 30s not really knowing what you want because you've never actually sat there long enough to give your brain time to figure out what that may be. And again, you might be saying, but I'm alone all the time already. I don't actually hang out with people that much. And I understand what you're saying, that's physically true, but being alone and holding your screen and consuming people's content is not the same by my definition as being alone with yourself. You have had company the entire time, it was just the feed on your phone. You genuinely may have not even spent an hour in the past years of your life being truly alone with yourself, with nothing coming in. Alone physically in your room, yeah, of course, but alone truly with your mind, maybe not. Some people also tell me that they use their alone time really well, that they always have an audiobook on or a podcast or something productive or educational, and that they're always listening to that. And to that, obviously, it's much better than doom scrolling, but it's still constant input, and still, if you're listening to that stuff occupying 100% of your free time, you again never give your brain that time to have its own inputs. You need some actual silence in there, not just a better quality of consumption. There's still a difference between filling your head with other people's voices, even though they may be better, versus letting your own voice have time to speak itself. Here's the reason that I think this most matters, and actually the reason that propelled me to make this video. Think about how the time in your day is actually split up. For most people, unless you are a successful entrepreneur who has separated their time from their income, most of your hours belong to other people. If you're in school, you're gonna spend those hours in your professor's class and doing homework, and obviously if you're at work, you're gonna spend typically at least 8 hours a day in the office or on the computer, on the commute, that sort of thing. Obligations or family stuff or running errands, that is all basically time that you don't have fully to yourself and that you don't have control over. But then there are those other hours in the day where you don't have anyone or anything that you have to spend them on. These are usually the gaps in your day, like I have described, maybe your lunch break at work, free time, and typically for most people, it's their evenings. Those hours are fully yours. There's nothing scheduled during them. That is the only time in your life that you are fully in control and fully able to direct. And what I think not enough people realize is that those hours and how you spend those is what decides much more than your occupied hours, the trajectory of your life. Everybody has their assigned hours that they have to do with, and some may be spending them better than others. Some may have higher paying jobs than others, but for the most part, they cancel out. The difference between the person who ends up very successful in 5 years and the person who stays the same throughout 5 years is very rarely a matter of talent, and it's very rarely a matter of how they spend their scheduled hours. It's almost always how they use their free, unallotted hours. One person invested those hours very wisely, whether they were learning a skill or building something or writing something or finding another way to make money, versus the other person who spent them very frivolously. And of course, what I mean by that is doom scrolling them away on the phone or TV, anything like that. Obviously, this video is about the phone. We're gonna go with that. The person who did that every evening for years has absolutely nothing to show for that, because scrolling doesn't bring you any benefit in life. I wanna turn this concept into a real life analogy because I just realized what I just said may sound pretty abstract. So picture two guys, same age, same job, and same starting point. Both get, let's say, 3 hours of free time each evening. One of them spends all three doom scrolling it away, just entertaining himself, trying to pass the time. The other person spends 1 hour on his phone, let's say. He's not a monk, he's a human, he wants to have some entertainment, but he spends the other two on building a side hustle. Day to day, that difference is almost nothing. If you took a week or two, you still couldn't distinguish them. There would be almost no difference. But if you zoom out into the longer term, that is when the difference starts to show itself. That 2 hours a day, if you did that every day for a year, I'm pretty sure that's 730 hours in a year difference that he has been putting into applying his side hustle versus 0 for the other guy. Now do that same math for 5 years, and those two people are now radically different, not even on the same level anymore. And it had nothing to do with talent or starting point. It came down to what each of them did during their free hours that they were alone with themselves. That's the situation for all of us. And for you, it may be decided by giving away those free hours to your phone. So right now, be totally honest with yourself. What do you do for the majority of those unassigned hours? Those hours that you are alone with yourself. I'm assuming if you're still watching this, that it is mainly spent on your phone, which means the only time in your life that you actually control, the part that you can put toward your future, you're spending doing nothing. Instead of steering through life, you're drifting through it. And that drifting is almost never neutral because your brain will always default to the easiest thing that's available when you don't decide something for it to do. And that easiest thing is always gonna be your phone. It's so accessible, it's right there, it's very entertaining. So you don't just stay where you are in life. By using that, you actually set yourself on a lower path than what you could have achieved, which is crazy because you never actually made a conscious decision to do that. You may have never thought about it this way. That's what's passively happening every time that you waste the evening away and be bad at being alone and make a bad decision when alone with yourself and waste all that time on your phone. That's the real cost of being terrible at being alone. It's not just an uncomfortable feeling when you're in a quiet room with yourself. It's wasting away your precious free time. That chance that you have when you're young to improve your future is all going into a machine that doesn't improve your future at all. And for a lot of people, this has been going on for years. For myself, this went on for years. I wasted countless hours. The single most valuable resource that you have, your time, is being spent on one of the activities with the least possible returns. Now you may be hearing all this, maybe you're quite extroverted, and you may be thinking, but being alone is something I want to avoid. It's not something I want to look forward to. It's lonely, it's depressing. So let me distinguish between two things that sound quite similar but are actually very different. There's being lonely, which is the feeling of wanting connection but not having it for whatever reason. And then there's solitude, which is voluntarily choosing to be alone with yourself. They are not the same thing at all, but they can definitely feel like it sometimes because the use of the phone tends to blend them together. When you're feeling lonely and you go on your phone, it gives you a digital sense of connection because you can see your friends' faces and hear their voices and see what's going on in their lives and feel updated and feel connected. So it feels like it's helping, but it's a digital, I would call it counterfeit version. It makes you a little worse at having real solitude, and it makes you a little worse at having a real connection at the same time, and ends up leaving you feeling more empty than before. That neediness itself, the fact that you can't stand to be alone with yourself for more than a few minutes without needing to go on a screen, is its own kind of loneliness. It's being unable to tolerate your own company. So being good at solitude is actually a good way to get out of loneliness from the other side, because slowly you become somebody that you yourself are okay with being around, that doesn't need constant stimulation to distract yourself. That is not the same as isolating yourself in a room and doom scrolling in the dark. In fact, it's the opposite. One is running from yourself and being unwilling to be alone with yourself, and the other is embracing and feeling comfortable with being alone with yourself. I don't really have a 5-step routine to fix this. This isn't a productivity video. This isn't a focus video. This is a relationship that you have to rebuild. And like any human relationship that you've neglected for the last several years, the beginning of this is going to be a little awkward. You have to start very small. You have to take the moments that you would normally fill with distracting yourself with something like going on your walk or the 30 minutes before bed, and don't pick up your phone and just be alone with your thoughts and be alone with yourself. Even if it's for a few minutes, leave your phone in your pocket, or better yet, leave it in another room and let your quiet time actually be quiet for once. To be honest, the first few times that you do this are going to feel bad, or at least they're gonna feel a little anxious or a little boring because you're not used to this. You've spent years never letting anything come up in your brain, and now when you do this, things are gonna come up. So that's not a bad sign, that's actually the sign that this is working. That's just the discomfort of getting reacquainted with yourself when you haven't bothered to do that for years, and that discomfort will pass. I think this will actually get easier a lot faster than you're thinking it may. And when you can do this successfully, you unlock something that a lot of people have lost, which is the ability to be totally comfortable with yourself and not need anything to stimulate you or distract you when you're alone and don't have anything to do. I think that being the person who can sit there and be alone with their own mind is a kind of freedom. But nobody is gonna go back and reclaim all those hours for you. That responsibility, of course, lies on you. The phone is engineered to consume your free time, and it will happily keep doing that for years and years and for the rest of your life as long as you let it. And it will also give you nothing back in the meantime. It is not going to develop a conscience and feel bad for wasting all your time over the past 10 years. The only person who can decide that your alone time hours get to actually be spent on developing your life is you. And you have to make that call. So sit with that. I know that sometimes reaching for your phone when you're bored feels harmless and it's not even something that you consciously think about. But if you always do that, that's the sign of a problem. It means you have lost the ability to be with yourself. And being with yourself is where you process your life, you get to know yourself, and in those alone hours where nobody else is around, it's where you either take your life in the direction that you want it to go or start drifting about and stay where you are. You can keep giving away all those hours to your phone and something that will never have any return for you, or you can take them back and invest them into yourself and start getting your life on the track that you know that it could be on and what you should be on. Nobody is going to fill that time with any meaning for you, so go be alone with yourself and decide what useful purpose you should use that time for. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.